This is the story of an experiment on the food habits of American teenagers. Its object was to record the advantages of a balanced diet and, in particular, to try to discover for the first time the part that fats play in the overall picture. The experiment was based on the American standard of living, but the ultimate results had a universal interest. At the Texas State College for Women, the dean, Dr. Pauline Mack, had called a meeting. She was to tell the girls about her experiment and to ask for their help over what was to be a most unusual year. To give them the background to the problem, Dr. Mack first explained how teenagers the world over seemed to be enjoying normal health. But was it perfect health? Did young people get all they could out of life? They felt fit, but was there a margin for them to be fitter still? She told them that earlier that year she had conducted a survey involving 3,000 average, apparently fit American adolescents. Their everyday food habits were studied, and every boy and girl underwent exhaustive physical, chemical, and functional tests. The examiners were always prepared for the unexpected, but they found these results startling. 3 out of 4 boys tired more easily than they should, and the same was true for 1 out of every 2 girls. There were signs of nutritional anemia in 2 out of 3 girls, and 1 out of 3 boys. Night blindness, another result of poor nutrition, is the inability to readjust the eyes after bright lights. A defect found in 1 out of 4 boys, 1 out of 3 girls. Poor complexions were common: dryness, acne, pimples. 1 out of 2 girls suffered in some way, 2 out of 5 boys. And almost none had good sound teeth. This was a survey on the teenagers, the vital years of growth on which the future depends. The report drew a nutritional curve. At the very time when it is most important, the human diet does not get the attention it demands, and nature exacts payment. These are the bones of a 3-year-old baby. During growth, the long bones become longer and more centers form from which the new bone structure is made. By the age of 20, the bones stop growing. But they only reach their full stature through these vital years if the food is right. People are as tall as their food lets them be. If they don't get the right nourishment in sufficient proportions, growth is stunted. This had happened in 1/3 of the apparently healthy boys and girls examined in the survey. This report on teenage health was indeed startling. At the root of the trouble lay the failure to appreciate food values and nourishment. The students had heard about vitamins, proteins, carbohydrates, and the like. The scientists have studied these thoroughly. But one major food group had still not been studied closely: the much misunderstood nutrient, fat. There had been experiments on animals, and they produced some convincing results. Take these 2 rats, brothers from the same litter. Mr. Whiskers on the right had plenty of fat in his diet, whilst the scruffy rat on the left had very little. Dr. Mack told the full story, and then she had a proposal to make. She wanted to conduct a nutritional experiment on the girls. 100 volunteers were needed for a year-long study of good nutrition, and in particular on the value of fats in the human diet. In anticipation of finding her 100 guinea pigs, she had already set up the record folders. Would the girls volunteer? Whose names were going on those covers? When the day was through and the girls settled down for the evening, there had been several jokes about sacrificial lambs and martyrs to science. But they were all thinking seriously about those other teenagers. And now they came to think, perhaps their own classmates weren't such perfect human specimens. There was Sarah Sue, for instance, always eating sweets. She never seemed to get enough. Julie and Barbara dreamed of being taller. And there was Janie, sleepyhead, nodding away in the classroom, flopped out in the evenings, and always the first to call it a day. Every girl would admit to skin troubles at one time or another. To them, dieting had meant cutting out everything good in the cause of beauty. But in this experiment, there was a new way of looking at the problem: a wholesome, balanced diet that would bring benefits all round. Well, whether it was vanity a pioneering spirit, or just hope, everyone decided to give it a try. The challenge was accepted. The experiment would begin for better or worse. The next morning, 122 girls, more than had been requested, went to the science laboratories and signed up for a year of controlled eating. The examiners discovered that these girl students were just like the teenagers in the first survey. Some hadn't worried about what they'd been eating, and some who had worried had still not been eating the right things. They were asked in the greatest detail everything about personal histories, especially food habits. Then came the physical examinations. The idea was to compare a detailed physical profile of every subject at the beginning and end of the diet study. Each girl had over 40 different examinations recorded in the case history folders, every facet of physical condition which nutrition could influence. You can't hide anything from a biomicroscope. Good or bad eating affects how well one hears, as well as sight and skin. Even tongues and ears were checked for any possible signs of past eating habits. The scientists knew exactly what they were looking for. All those guilty childhood secrets coming out at last. Many of the tests bewildered those girls who had no idea that the quality of skin or sight depended so directly on food. Poor lambs, they thought dieting was only to make one lose bulges. All kinds of body measurements were taken to help the research workers complete their records. Vital statistics were accessible enough, but that wasn't enough. They wanted measurements of the bones themselves. X-rays told how well the bones were formed, whether they had stopped growing, and whether they had reached the right stage of maturity. There were step-up trials and pulse checks to see how well the students reacted to exercise. The press-ups measured energy. There were a few groans heard that day. Finally, everyone had a blood analysis and the samples underwent chemical tests in the college laboratories. Nothing was left to guesswork. With the research workers' report to hand, the experts began to work out the diet groups. Remember, this experiment was to find out more about nourishment and particularly fats. While every girl would have the same well-planned diet, the amount of fats would differ. There's a saying, you are what you eat, and it's true. The carbohydrate foods supply energy. They are bread, potatoes, cereals, sugar, and sweets. Fats of different sorts also give energy. Butter, margarine, cooking fats, oils, fatty bacon. Proteins, the bodybuilders, are both animal, like meat, milk, cheese, and eggs, and vegetable, like whole cereals, beans, and nuts. Minerals, or salts, are obtained from green vegetables, and also in foods already on the wheel. Meats, milk, cereals, cheese. Vitamin A comes from liver, margarine, milk, eggs, butter, and from some vegetables. B vitamins also come from vegetables, and still more from meat, milk, eggs, bread, and cereals. Vitamin C is highest in fruits, like oranges, black currants, tomatoes. Vitamin D is found in liver and fish liver oils, and also in margarine. And beyond that, these foods have other nutrients about which the scientists are just beginning to learn. With these unknown quantities, the only way to be positive of getting all the nourishment needed is to eat a mixed diet. This is done most simply by being sure that each day's meals contain the right balance of good foods. One day's eating should include something from every section of the wheel. For example, breakfast. At least a quarter of the essential nourishment needed should be taken at this meal. It should have one of the protein foods, egg, lean meat, or fish. Again, lunch should present a good selection. Variety is important because foods, like people, work best in teams. Dinner completes the day and fills in the gaps on the wheel. It draws upon many groups, some new, some repeats. And for the energetic, growing teenagers, sensible snacks at tea time and supper make quite sure that nothing is left out. From time to time, such meats as liver and kidney should be eaten. This was the general scheme on which the basic diets were planned. All would get about 2,400 calories a day, which is the accepted level for an adequate diet. The only difference between the four groups was to be in the amount of fat. To do this, all visible fats were removed and then reintroduced in measured quantities. The high-fat diet was to include 30 to 35% of its total calories in fats, and that's only the normal consumption in Britain. The other three groups got progressively less fat. For example, some girls had fried foods, others baked foods. Some girls got table fats, and some did not. It took just one meal in the special cafeteria to make the girls glad they'd volunteered. Martyrs to science, they'd never eaten so well before. The high-fat group took most fats all along the line. At the milk counter, there was whole milk, then 2 pats of margarine for rolls and baked potatoes. The dressing for the salad was made from vegetable oils. Incidentally, the same brand of margarine was used throughout the experiment so that there would be no change of standards. The girls on the medium-fat diet got only 25% of their calories from fat. They also took whole milk, but instead of margarine, they had cheese on their potato and jam on their rolls. They too had oil salad dressing, so the only difference was in the absence of margarine. The low-fat group went down the scale again. They had skimmed milk. Margarine was the only fat in their diet, and they took a salad dressing made without oil. They had 19% of their calories as fat. The very low-fat group, the last of the four, took only 12% of their calories as fat. They ignored fat throughout. They took skimmed milk, cheese and jam, and the non-oil salad dressing. Yet surprisingly enough, all 4 meals looked very much the same. Throughout the year, the meals were to be varied, well-cooked and appetizing. By controlling the amount of visible fats, the dietitians could keep exact records of the quantity of fats eaten. Naturally, certain fat-rich foods had to be omitted, not because they were undesirable, but to control the amount of fat in the experiment. Gravies, ice cream, and fatty meats like bacon were out, and all visible fats were trimmed away from meats. The year progressed. Not only did the food pioneers eat with each other, but they started to go around in groups. At the start of the experiment, Dr. Mack had said that one result she expected from a complete circle of good nutrition was an increase in vitality. Well, here it was, just as she had prophesied. After only 3 months, most of the girls were feeling more alert, more alive, ready to get up and go instead of mooning around. Work and play became more interesting. Nothing else had changed in their lives, so they realized that this could only be due to the all-round improvement in their food. When the frosty weather came, they found that something new had been added. Top vitality comes with top nutrition. Once the girls realized that this experiment was doing them good, then they took their diets even more seriously and kept their promises, even on barbecues. Top nutrition is not only a question of choosing the right foods in the right quantities. It means preparing them properly and attractively. There was a constant feminine interest in watching the professionals that work in the kitchens, and the girls were able to pick up some useful tips in serving appetizing meals. As the dietitians planned, the meat fat was trimmed off to keep the fat content controlled. What better way of introducing fat than southern fried chicken? This was for the high-fat group. The low-fat groups got baked chicken. Old-fashioned ideas of dieting had been shattered. The misguided, who had thought that correct eating, though doubtless brimming over with vitamins, would be dull and uninteresting, could not have been more delighted at being proved wrong. This food was delicious, appetizing, colorful and tasty, and good for them. By early spring, some quite remarkable changes could be sensed. Anyone who had seen these girls at the start of the experiment would spot that instantly. Most of them were looking and feeling different, and believe it or not, whole personalities were changing. They had gained confidence in themselves, confidence that comes from good health. Autumn, winter, spring, and now summer, almost a year since the experiment began. To round the trial period off, there was a party for the 122 dieters and their boyfriends. Most of the talk was about the experiment, now drawing to a close. But many of the girls didn't have to wait for the experts' reports. These were not slight changes that had taken place, and the majority were decidedly for the better. Mary, Pat, and Julie both used to suffer from bad complexions, but spots and blemishes were a thing of the past. Better skins and neater figures gave the girls more assurance and composure. The dresses reminded the girls how they looked last year. Billy Jack had lost some weight. She was on high fat, but Barbara had gained, and she was on low fats. Girls who had been used to sitting out dances by themselves now found plenty of willing escorts. Remember Janie, the sleepyhead? Here was a complete change, a girl sparkling with energy. And if any of the girls needed a second opinion, the boys gave their verdict. There had never been so much cutting in as the evening when the dieters emerged from their year of controlled eating. But now for the verdict of the scientists, a cold and impersonal verdict, depending only on proven facts. Would these measurements differ from those taken a year ago? Would the results be influenced by all those eggs, vegetables, cereals, the balanced diets, the 3 good meals a day? And would there be any differences in the 4 levels of fat? How would it all add up? The answers were there in the statistics. Everyone was eager to find out how the experiments went, the girls most of all, but they had to wait. Dr. Mack first had to make her report to the college authorities. They heard how she had a new proof that a top-quality diet pays off for teenagers. Better health, better skin, and better in so many ways. But the girls who showed the most changes for the better were the high-fat group, those who had received the equivalent of a normal consumption of fat. The girls, especially those who had previously cut out fats to slim, received some shocks when Dr. Mack gave her report to the class.
Now, I know many of you formerly cut out fat, like other girls whom we have studied. But this was a mistake, as your own records will show. So let us begin by seeing what fats did, or rather did not do, to your weight.
The girls on the high-fat diet rarely got hungry and didn't eat snacks, but they did eat their diets well. As a result, the overweights lost, the normal weights remained constant, and the underweights gained. But the low-fat girls were often hungry and ate extras, so only a few lost weight. Some gained, and many stayed overweight. This shows that a high-fat diet with whole milk, table margarine, cooking fats and oils satisfies hunger, and weight can be controlled. With almost no fats, the temptation is to go on nibbling, and weight increases accordingly.
Obviously, a reasonable amount of fat on the dinner table does not always become fat on the body. You see, fats digest more slowly than other nutrients, keep you feeling well fed, reduce hunger. All of this adds up. Fat does not necessarily make you fat. Not only in weight, but in skin conditions, something equally important has happened.
The preliminary examination revealed that 50% of the girls to be given a high-fat diet had acne. At the end of the experiment, there were only half as many. But those on low-fat diets got worse. The important food values in the fats had worked, together with the proteins and vitamins, to build a clear, healthy skin. The girls on margarine had come off best, thanks to vitamin A, while the no-table fat girls lost on many counts. The experiment also proved the value of fats to the bones. The girls on high fats again improved, far more than the others. And in good red blood, the improvement was clearly marked. 70% of the high-fat group came up to full standard, while not one of the others showed improvement. In the test for night blindness, vitamin A again did the trick. Half the high-fat girls developed better night vision. The experiment had given these facts conclusively, and Dr. Mack assured the girls that all this could be credited to a balanced diet. No one could deny the evidence, and the high-fat groups with a normal amount of margarine, cooking fats, and oils in their diets came out clearly the winners on weight, skin beauty, fatigue resistance, on many factors. These before and after pictures supply even more proof. Peggy started the experiment at a perfect weight, and although she was on high fats, she stayed exactly the same. But overweight Betty Clare lost 8 pounds on high fat and was still going down. Lou Ida always wanted a few more pounds, and she got them from the high-fat diet. Barbara Jean thought she would lose weight on low fats, but instead she gained nearly 10 pounds. On low fats too, Mary Pat almost ruined her complexion. Her skin recovered when she switched to high fats. Skin beauty was one of the biggest problems. Julie would never have thought of wearing a dress like this before, but on the high-fat diet, her back was clear of acne. For those girls, long puzzled by conflicting ideas of wise eating, the problem was solved. They had proved that a normal amount of fat is essential to health, and that, contrary to common belief, fat does not necessarily make one fat. Indeed, the way to good health and perfect physical condition is through a balanced all-round diet. And in that diet, fat must play its part.